Good morning to all of you and a very warm welcome. So on behalf of the International Peace Institute, it is my pleasure to welcome you to today's event, which is organized in collaboration with the City of New York, the Open Society Foundation, Columbia University's Global Policy Initiative, and Concordia. Today's forum begins the New York City's Global Mayors Summit, a forum where mayors will discuss local solutions and city-level opportunities in response to global migration and refugee challenges. Here at IPI, we often convene local, national, and international leaders to share perspectives, gain understanding, and build partnerships in order to foster empathy on issues of great international importance. We are delighted this morning to welcome so many mayors from around the world, especially as we witness the ever-growing importance of local leadership. This morning's opening session, which is entitled Shaping Priorities with States, Cities, Migrants and Refugees, will provide the opportunity to hear from leaders working to proactively address issues of immense importance: the refugee crisis and the increase in international migration worldwide. And it is the various perspectives that we will hear today from the UN headquarters, city leaders, and national and international decision makers that make this event pertinent, timely, and necessary in order to move forward together regarding the two global compacts in 2019, namely a global compact on refugees and a global compact for safe, orderly, and regular migration. It is also my very great pleasure to welcome the chair of the IPI Board of Directors and director of the Global Policy Initiative at Columbia University, Professor Michael Doyle, who's sitting here, as the moderator of today's important event. And it is also my deep privilege to welcome back to IPI two distinguished international leaders whose wisdom and, I'd like to say, great passion for humanity is boundless. The Honorable Louise Arbour, hi Louise, the UN Special Representative for the Secretary General on International Migration, will give the keynote address. And following her presentation, Her Excellency Mary Robinson, member of the Elders, where are you, Mary? She's not, oh, because she's coming shortly, okay. So I shouldn't welcome her before she arrives. Anyhow, she is, as you all know, a member of the Elders and the first woman president of Ireland and former UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. And she will share with us her reflections on the issues at hand. The massive rise of refugee and migration flows have shocked people's conscience and unsettled governments at actually every level, as well as internationally, as well as institutions worldwide. The IPI project, the Independent Commission on Multilateralism, or ICM for short, has had very strong support for the Global Compacts as one of its key recommendations. And let me quote from the report. It stated, I quote, "Politicians, the media, and other leaders should reduce fears about strangers in need, not fuel them. They should help demythologize and rehumanize refugees, migrants, and internationally displaced persons. They should also stress basic values of human dignity, solidarity, and empathy," unquote. We are indeed this morning honored to co-organize today's event, and we are commending New York City for its leadership in promoting partnerships, and working to comprehensively address global challenges by supporting principles of pluralism and community-based innovations. It is now my very great pleasure to welcome to introduce Penny Abuwadina, I hope this was not with an Italian accent, New York's City Commissioner for International Affairs. As head of the Mayor's Office for International Affairs, she leads New York City's effort to build a global platform from which the city is promoting its goals of a more just and accessible society, showcasing the diversity of New Yorkers, and I consider myself as being one, having lived here for 12 years, and sharing policies and best practices with the world. So a full biography of today's distinguished speakers are in your programs, but before we begin, may I remind you to please silence your cell phones, though we encourage you to tweet about the event. So Penny, the floor is yours.
Thank you for that kind introduction, Ambassador, and for hosting us here at the International Peace Institute. Excellencies, colleagues, and honored guests, I am pleased to welcome you to New York City for the 72nd UN General Assembly, especially today for this timely Global Mayors Summit on migration, refugee policy, and practice. It's an honor to co-host this event with my colleagues from the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs, our partners from the Open Society Foundations, Concordia, and Columbia University's Global Policy Institute. Can we also take a minute to please give a round of applause for the staff that put this together? From so many organizations, they worked tirelessly to bring this important event together today. Mayor de Blasio and I are proud that New York City is home to the largest diplomatic corps in the world, which includes 114 consulates, 193 permanent missions, and of course the headquarters of the United Nations. The Mayor's Office for International Affairs serves as the primary liaison between the City of New York and this diplomatic community. By bringing together local leaders, experts, and representatives from New York City and the international community, we are able to share information and forge innovative solutions to challenges that can be adopted both locally and globally. With an incredibly diverse population of 8.5 million people, New York City grapples with key development concerns that might be familiar to all of you. The need for climate resilience, equal opportunity, jobs, quality education, and affordable housing, among others. Further, 1 in 3 New Yorkers is foreign-born. We must be responsive to our communities as it relates to migration and refugee policy, where our futures are inextricably linked. That is why Mayor de Blasio released his One NYC, the Plan for a Strong and Just City, which is our development agenda for New York City, and it's one example as to how this city is advancing the global sustainable development goals. In New York City, we feel and see the challenges that the SDGs address every day on our streets and in our populations. We have the opportunity and indeed the obligation to create strategies that are responsive to these challenges and that embed the aspirations of the global goals within them. And under this administration, I can say that we have done just that. As the global community works towards a roadmap for an orderly, safe, and responsible migration as described in SDG 10.7 and a comprehensive refugee response framework, they should draw upon the unique perspectives cities bring and the essential leadership role local leaders play in responding to the global migrant and refugee crisis. Through programs like IDNYC, New York City's municipal ID program, we welcome all New Yorkers, irrespective of their documentation status, to participate fully as a member of our New York City community. And as the United States federal government reconsiders protections for 800,000 dreamers, New York City will continue to fight for those residents. As a Sri Lankan-born immigrant, a stroke of a pen from President Ronald Reagan changed my life. Thanks to his immigration reform bill in 1986, I had the ability to obtain a driver's license, to apply to college without fearing questions about my legal status, the opportunity to explore jobs in the exact field I wanted to pursue, and so much more. From undocumented to citizen, I have built a career in the nonprofit and public sector. We want to ensure that our governments are opening doors of opportunity for those who are seeking new beginnings or are fleeing war and famine. Our collective action will impact so many lives, such as mine so many years ago. In her timely opinion piece, the Honorable Mary Robinson most recently notes that the power of local leadership. Indeed, cities have a role in multilateral problem solving, even when national leaders fail to do so. Later today, you will hear from Mayor Bill de Blasio, the many mayors and city representatives who have traveled here to share best practices, learn from our challenges and successes, and support one another as we collectively address some of the most pressing challenges of our day. Thank you so much for being here in New York City for these discussions over the next 2 days. They will help us work collectively towards our common goal to ensure an equitable, safe, and inclusive city for all of our residents. And I look forward to working alongside you on this mission. Thank you again, and welcome to New York City.
Thank you both for your comments. Inspiring. Great way to start us off. My name is Michael Doyle. It's a real pleasure to moderate this morning's discussion. One rarely gets to wear two hats, especially indoors, but as the chair of the International Peace Institute's board, I join Ambassador Larson in welcoming you all, and as the director of the Columbia Global Policy Initiative, I also am very happy to welcome you here to this very important occasion. When one talks to mayors, they are, to excuse the Americanism, where rubber meets the road when it comes to governance, where real people need jobs, they need health care, where they need security, protection for their families, and this is where governance solutions happen. So it's a genuine honor to be with you. My first honor this morning is to introduce one of the great leaders, one of the great citizens of global public policy. The range of her career is remarkable. The current job that she takes on is that of Special Representative of the Secretary General for International Migration, where she has been entrusted with the challenging task of following up on the summit of 19 September of last year for migrants in a way to find safe, orderly, and regular ways in which they can establish their lives and contribute to the societies they come from, to the societies that they join. And increasingly, as she tells us, these societies are one and the same. That is, countries of origin, transit, and migration and destination are very much the same. So it's a real honor to introduce her. It's very few people for whom one could say that with a job so eminent as the one that she currently holds, it's only one more job in such a distinguished career. Everyone here in this room knows her as having been the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, the Chief Prosecutor of the International Criminal Tribunals for the former Yugoslavia and Rwanda, and for the Canadians in this room, a member of the Supreme Court of Canada and of its Court of Appeals, and in the NGO sector, the president of the International Crisis Group from 2009 to 2014. A truly distinguished global citizen and leader. Madam Obor, it's our pleasure to have you join us this morning. Thank you. Please take the stand.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's a real pleasure to be with you here today at this Global Mayors Summit on Migration and Refugee Policy and Practice, organized by the City of New York with the Open Society Foundations, Columbia University's Global Policy Initiative, and Concordia. I also wish to thank the International Peace Institute for hosting the event, in particular Ambassador Larson for his very kind words. I'm delighted to see some 50 or so mayors and other city leaders gathered here at this time at the opening of the United Nations General Assembly. As was just mentioned, and as I'm sure you've been reminded many times, this time last year, the UN General Assembly convened a high-level summit on addressing large movements of refugees and migrants, and the summit culminated with global leaders endorsing by consensus a historic document entitled the New York Declaration for Refugees and Migrants, in which states committed to develop two compacts, one for migrants and another for refugees, and this is all to be done by September or possibly a little later in the fall of 2018. If successful, these compacts will constitute a global framework on the rules of engagement and the political commitments required by states to enable life-saving international cooperation, to ensure that all migration is safe, orderly, and regular, and to achieve more effective refugee protection. While my mandate focuses on the Migration Compact, I never forget the complementarity and the considerable confluence of interest that are raised by issues concerning both refugees and migrants. Since I began my mandate as the UN Special Representative for International Migration last March, I have been a strong proponent of the need to engage with local leaders as we seek to understand the implications of a more mobile world and work to better address the resulting challenges and opportunities. As in other areas of international policymaking, cities are increasingly active in the realm of migration policy and practice. You are more and more collaborating across national borders to share ideas, form coalitions, and at times challenge national governments to adopt policies that will be truly effective at the local level. Cities are uniquely positioned to harvest the benefits of well-managed migration policies. Conversely, they are also at the front line of addressing migration challenges as and when they occur. You play the leading role in both receiving migrants, providing immediate services, and in guiding longer-term efforts at social and economic inclusion. There is a symbiotic relationship between the policies that city adopts or don't adopt and the success of our efforts in shaping national and international policies and processes related to migrants. 50% of the world's population resides in cities, a figure that is only expected to grow. The leadership of mayors and cities in fostering and steering expanding and diverse societies will become all the more important in the decades to come. Diversity in and of itself does not equate to social and economic inclusion and integration. Meaningful policies must be put in place that apply to the population as a whole, including host communities, which in many cases face similar marginalization and exclusion challenges to those of the migrants that come to live in their midst. In a time where there is as much hope as there is concern and fear about migration, city leadership has shown by example the possibilities of constructively meeting the needs of its residents, natives, and migrants with an open and welcoming attitude. From access to municipal identification cards, one that I happily have access to in New York City as a resident, to citywide billboard campaigns fostering the importance of respect, of safety and dignity for all, the key principles of the United Nations Together campaign, cities play a key role in shaping public attitudes around migration and in how their immigrant communities can engage in municipal life. As national governments grapple with issues related to irregular entry of migrants, local officials are more likely to interact with established irregular migrants, many of whom work in the informal economy in conditions of vulnerability and precariousness. Putting in place the so-called firewalls between immigration enforcement and public services is increasingly seen as an effective way of facilitating access to justice, to housing, healthcare, education, and social protection, and social and labor services for migrants. On these As on many other issues, cooperation at all levels is essential to managing migration in a way that is people-centered and forward-looking. City administrations will need support from each other, from national and regional governments, from the international community, and from all actors in society who are engaging in this realm, including NGOs, businesses, and private citizens. Such support is vital for all cities, but even more so, it's more pronounced in resource-poor cities and urban settings. It is for this reason, in understanding the different capacities and resources of cities all over the world, that I also invite states and other donors to support dedicated programs that help developing cities build their capacities in this area and engage more directly with other cities to overcome challenges and to more regularly exchange their experiences and good practices. In closing, I wish to reiterate my appreciation for your presence here at the United Nations and my appreciation also to the City of New York as a partner to this Global Mayors Summit. I look forward to hearing from you on how we collectively may join efforts as we develop the two global compacts through a variety of initiatives to be discussed in the coming days. The outcome of your discussions will constitute an invaluable official input into the process towards achieving these compacts, and I'm very confident that the United Nations will glean from your experiences insights that will guide our work and that we will be able to celebrate the outcome of this exercise this time next year. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Madame Abour, for those wonderful remarks, most particularly the invitation to all the mayors to participate in what will be the effort to form a global compact for migration. Madame Abour realizes and has invited us all to make a contribution to that effort under the view that there's so many lessons that can come out of the cities that we would very much want to have reflected at the global level. So thank you very much for those comments. I'm now also deeply honored and very, very pleased to introduce Mary Robinson. She is the first woman president of Ireland from 1990 to 1997. And she's the former United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights from 1997 to 2002. I had the privilege of being in Kofi Annan's administration and having seen her in action. And if she will forgive me, I will say she's not only a tireless advocate for justice, she's an eloquent one, she is courageous, and she is fiery. And she has demonstrated all of that at the global level. So I'm very pleased to see her here. She is speaking for the elders, of which she has been a charter member, invited by Nelson Mandela in 2007. And she also has deep experience in the UN community on the diplomatic front, where she has been the special envoy for the Great Lakes, the special envoy for climate change, the special envoy for El Nino and the climate in 2016. She also is an inspiration to we academics. She's the Chancellor of the University of Dublin, and she's the president of the Mary Robinson Foundation on Climate Justice. So I'm very pleased to welcome you here, Mary. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. It's a pleasure to be back here at the International Peace Institute and indeed to be back as an elder. The last time I was here, I was with a number of my fellow elders. And it's an honour to address this distinguished gathering today alongside global figures who've done so much to advocate for the rights and dignity of refugees and migrants wherever they find themselves. It is a particular pleasure to follow Louise Arbour, who was one of my successors and who now has her very important role. And I will echo quite a number of points that Louise has made, but they're worth echoing because I think we need to reinforce them. And there is no better setting for this summit than New York, a city built by immigrants, powered by their dreams, and the gateway to this great diverse nation made up of peoples from all corners of the planet. Like many of you, I was here 1 year ago for the UN Summit for Refugees and Migrants. It was the first time the issues had been discussed together on this scale at the United Nations, and it signalled the international community's acknowledgement that the unprecedented number of people on the move was a global challenge. I spoke at the summit in my capacity as a member of the Elders, the group of independent former leaders brought together by Nelson Mandela 10 years ago to work for peace and human rights. Madiba gave the Elders a powerful mandate to speak truth to power and give a voice to the voiceless. And it's in that spirit that I'm here today as we reflect on the tumultuous developments of the past 12 months and the unique roles cities can play in upholding the values of diversity, solidarity, and compassion. Last year's summit culminated in the New York Declaration, as Louise has said, where the countries of the world committed to essential guiding principles aimed at improving the world's response to refugees and migrants. The declaration also set out the first steps to be taken towards the same end, the two global compacts, one of which Louise is in charge of, which are currently being developed and due to be agreed in 2018. The Elders welcomed the summit and continue to support the process of developing the global compacts. But at the same time, we are acutely aware for people on perilous journeys across the Sahara, Mediterranean, or Andaman Sea, stranded in camps in Greece or Kenya or elsewhere, or those in host communities from Lebanon to here in New York City. Noble words spoken or written at the United Nations become meaningful only when they are translated into real changes on the ground. Migration is a matter of flesh and blood and not arid statistics. Every person on the move has rights and dignity that must be respected and protected at every stage of their journey. This is particularly true for women and girls who are vulnerable to sexual abuse and exploitation from traffickers, smugglers, security guards, and unscrupulous opportunists in host communities, including cities. You mayors can be the indispensable agents of positive change that protects refugees and migrants. And for this reason, I'm particularly grateful to have the opportunity to meet and hear from you today. Cities thrive on immigration, diversity, and pluralism. We see this across the United States and the wider world, from New York to London, from Beijing to Brasilia. Cities can and should be the crucible for an inclusive and empowering globalization that drives sustainable economic growth and offers a model of integration to wider society. Yet, the political and economic climate is challenging, and bold leadership is required from mayors and civic authorities to fulfill cities' potential and confront the threat of populist isolationism. Migration is currently the main driver of urbanization, with climate change a significant and rising push factor in this phenomenon. As we've heard, more than 65 million people worldwide have been forced from their homes as a result of conflict, climate change, poverty, and a myriad of other factors. In the past few weeks alone, we've seen the physical, social, and economic devastation wrought on American cities by Hurricanes Harvey and Irma and on vulnerable communities across the Caribbean. We also saw the death and destruction caused by severe monsoons across South Asia. We know from previous experience, such as Hurricane Katrina in 2005, that some people affected will be displaced from their homes forever. Many of these globally displaced people are drawn to cities, but the capacity to integrate these new arrivals in a manner consistent with their human rights and dignity is often woefully inadequate, reflecting, unfortunately, an equally inadequate response from political leaders. In the 12 months since the New York Declaration, we've seen worrying retrograde steps taken by countries or regions to whom the world has traditionally looked for leadership. President Trump has sought to more than halve the number of refugees that can be admitted to the United States this year alone, and repeatedly expressed his desire to ban refugees from certain countries from ever reaching these shores at all. As Kofi Annan, former UN Secretary General and now chair of the Elders, has said, and I quote, "Curtailing the US refugee resettlement program undermines the great values of a nation that has always championed humanitarian principles and human rights." Across the Atlantic, the European Union has also adopted policies which endanger the values on which it was built: cooperation, responsibility sharing, and human rights. European countries have so far failed to put together and develop an effective common response of shared responsibility to the increased influx of refugees and migrants. Instead, deals are being struck with governments and other actors with little or no regard for human rights to seal borders and stem the flow of migrants, neither an ethical nor a durable solution. This needs to be seen as part of the wider disturbing global trend to encroach on rights, dignity and freedom. The shutting down of civil society voice poses a real risk, not just to human rights and justice for refugees and migrants, but also to wider issues of development, peace and security. But the past year has also borne testament to the irrepressible humanity of so many individuals, families and communities who have opened their doors and hearts to their fellow human beings in time of need. From privately chartered boats rescuing migrants from the Mediterranean to private sponsorship schemes in Canada enabling refugees to be safely resettled and integrated into communities, the resilience of global solidarity offers hope for the future. And cities are at the front line of this struggle. How they rise to the challenges of reception and integration can demonstrate the great benefits of economic pluralism, which is an essential tool in combating xenophobic and anti-migrant narratives. Cities and their mayors can assert the principles of international cooperation even when national leaders willfully spurn their responsibilities. For example, the pledge of the Global Covenant of Mayors, including New York, Washington, D.C., Chicago, Los Angeles, and Miami Beach, to continue to work to honour the Paris Agreement on climate change. This is consistent with the remarkable mobilisation of civil society and non-state actors, including the C40 Cities Alliance, that I saw in 2015, ahead of the Paris Climate Agreement, in my capacity as the UN Secretary-General's Special Envoy on climate change. Bringing civil society to the table brings new ideas and innovation and gains the support of the people needed to actually implement change. The past year has seen many mayors play defiant roles to implement positive change on a number of fronts, not least those cities and states here in the United States, which have challenged President Trump's order to scrap the DACA or Dreamers scheme that protects child immigrants. These points underline why this Global Mayors Summit is so important. It's indispensable that you, the mayors, be consulted and that your insights help to shape the global compacts. And it's your continuing work at the front lines, long after the compacts are agreed next year, that will determine their real impact and success. In preparing this speech, I was reminded of Peter Sutherland's recommendations in his seminal report on international migration published this year to empower cities and migrants. As Peter writes, cities around the globe are playing an ever-increasing role in welcoming migrants and are developing the functions and tools to manage greater diversity. They should be given the power and resources to do this properly. The elders echo Peter's call. We believe that to date, cities and their leaders haven't been sufficiently included in national and international debates where policy priorities are shaped. Your voices need to be heard in the future, and the elders will stand with you in the struggle for civic virtues and human dignity. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, President Robinson. That was a wonderful address. For those who have known you for many years, it was classic Mary Robinson. Part of the job of the elders is to hold their successors accountable. And I think we heard a very eloquent statement of just that and the importance that mayors will play in advancing the Global Compact. So thank you for those words. We now turn to the mayors. And this morning we have speaking to us the Honorable Kasim Reid, the Honorable Marvin Rees, the Honorable Arias Lukwago, and the Honorable Andreas Holstein. Mayor Reid, I'm told, is on the way, and we will introduce him when he arrives. In the meantime, I'm very pleased to introduce the Honorable Mayor of Bristol, Marvin Rees. He was elected recently, if I'm reading my notes correctly, in May of 2016. He comes to this position with a remarkable set of previous career experiences. You have to be, I think, a jack of all trades to be a successful mayor. And Mayor Reid has done a number of activities that strike me as very impressive. Just to mention a few, he has served in the UK International Christian Aid Agency, where he's also served as a volunteer in Washington, Washington, United States, where he worked with faith-based groups and with President Bill Clinton's welfare reform bill. He's served in public health, working as a program manager for the National Health Service, where he focused on delivering race equality and mental health care in Bristol. He's also been in radio broadcasting, and part of his election as mayor was a determination to improve the opportunities for young people in the city of Bristol, and there he's founded a very important city leadership program on which he has been working. And with all of that, he has focused his priorities on tackling housing issues, building more homes, improving transport, improving the flow of people across the city, improving healthcare intervention. In all of these respects, he's an outstanding mayor, but also a typically good mayor. That's what mayors do. So it's a real pleasure to welcome him here this morning. And I look forward to his remarks on the role of mayors in these global challenges that we face on safe, orderly, and regular migration. Mayor Reid, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Should get you to write my next campaign leaflet. I think that will really help. I really appreciate the introduction. It's amazing to be here, and I have asked for you to help time me to. Good news is I'm trying to keep it down to 4 minutes, make everyone feel better. First of all, can I just say, particularly to the US mayors, that I would just want to thank you. So as someone looking in on this country right now and seeing things that, if I to put it politely, I find quite confusing and concerning, that there is a voice of sanity and there are some standards, so not just US standards, but international standards that Mayor de Blasio and other mayors across the United States are standing up for right now. And it gives me some hope. So I just want to say, to the extent I can, from mayors around the world and the global parliament and mayors of which I'm a part, I want to thank you for taking that stand. And just to say as well, I just find it so inspiring to be here. I truly do, even just in my early conversations just now. I just got a sense, this is a small room, but I think there could be really big implications coming out of this room. For the way we think about governance going into the future. There seems to be a real alignment at the moment about the importance of city leadership. And I think the force of that alignment, the power of the argument that coming from that not only has logical sense to it and moral sense, but as I said, it has a real energy about it. And I find that incredibly exciting because sometimes in my, every day, my conversations at home in the papers will be about, did I cut the funding to a school crossing patrol? Did we keep a library open? And yet, we've got to deal with those everyday things. As we said, when we run cities, we deal with those very real and raw issues. But at the same time, we can't lose contact with the fact that we need to think about the way the world is actually run. Very, very briefly, my city, Bristol, it's about 450,000 people. Just tell you about the nature of it. It's a port city. It was one of the 4 biggest slave ports in the UK. I'm the first mayor of African descent, I'm told, in Europe, but the European mayors may correct me, but that's what I'm told. And so being elected to my city as a mixed race man with a white mother and a white English, Welsh, and then before that Irish mother, with a Jamaican father as well, puts me in the crosshairs of this internationalism that we want our city to live up to. 16% of our adult population is non-white British. 33% of our school population is. So our demographics are changing incredibly quickly. But I do want to talk about, we'll get into the refugees and immigration and migrants, but I just want to kind of keep it open because, in my opening remarks, because I think that the failure of the world to deal with migrants and refugees is a symptom of much deeper problems. Whether we're talking about climate change, whether we're talking about inequality, democratic legitimacy, which is a problem we have in my country, people not believing in politics, growing economic inequality, people being marginal to the economy, a housing crisis. I think what we're witnessing at the moment are the very real limitations on the abilities of national governments, national political structures to deliver in the world in the way that it is right now. It feels to me that the world has moved on. It's not what it was 70 years ago, and we're using a 100-year-old political model to try and deal with the world the way it is now. And we need structures that are more nimble, more dynamic, and able to think about challenges and these challenges and these opportunities in a different way. And I think the place we go to find that new way of thinking is going to be in cities. I think when I look at Donald Trump and everything that comes from Donald Trump over here, or I look at Brexit and everything that Brexit meant in the UK, what we're looking at is not just a failure of individuals. We're looking at a failure of a system. And we urgently need, I think, what we've been terming a rebalancing of sovereignty in the world, a shifting of sovereignty away from national political structures to city governance. That is not to say we don't need national governments. I think we do. But we need a rebalancing of sovereignty and weight and influence over the way the world is being governed. If I just say a couple of final things, I think in cities, not only we find these solutions, we find the very real thing. So my city, Bristol, we are a city of sanctuary, just like you have sanctuary cities over here. We have innovative programs going on to reach out to new people to the city, whether that be integrated football teams on a very raw level, these very, very grassroots things, mentors that mentor people into employment, welcome new families, a hospitality network, whether we are working with our public mental health team to make sure that our health services and our mental health services are accessible to people with English as a second language. All these very raw, immediate needs that people have when they settle in a new place. That's what we are dealing with as a city. Someone said earlier, and I agree, national governments talk about numbers. In the cities, we talk about lives and we talk about people and we talk about families. And as city leaders, I walk past people and I look them in the eye. I live in an area that, to be perfectly frank, is being gentrified. But when I walk to work, I look people in the eye that are new to my country. I walk through Easton, which is a very large number of migrants. So it's real. And people come to visit me on my office as well. The immediacy of city leadership is there. But I want to say a couple of other things as well. One is I think that not only should we look to cities as a place to come up with responses to world challenges in terms of meeting the challenge, but actually driving the framework that we reduce the possibility of problems in the first instance. I think cities have a different way of thinking about world problems. I'm a mixed race man, as I said. At one point someone asked me, whose side am I going to be on in a war between black and white? I had a framework for approaching that challenge. But I think that whereas my national government talks about identity in one-dimensional terms, as a city, I talk about Bristol being 180 countries of origin and 92 languages. Identity in my city is multi-dimensional, it's dynamic. We can talk in that way that still includes people in a way that my national government cannot. That kind of framework for thinking about who belongs where and who has a right to be there where is something that is absolutely essential to the world the way it is right now. And I think cities can offer that. Secondly, I think we need to look at cities as, again, free-framing sovereignty as a place to drive new policy, new global governance approaches. In terms of how we do that, I've got a list, but I'll save that and then we can investigate some of that in the discussion.
Thank you very much, Mayor Reid, for those remarks. It's wonderful to see you here in that role. You are living proof that history can be transcended, and with the leadership that you are offering, that is the history of Bristol in the 18th century, and the leadership you're offering, that you can create a new future for such a dynamic city. So it's a genuine pleasure, and thank you for your remarks. I'm now going to go back to the order of the panel and introduce the Honorable Mayor Reid, Kasim Reid of Atlanta. His record in Atlanta is extraordinary. I'm not sure how much is in the material before you. He is the 59th mayor of the city of Atlanta. He was elected to a second term in 2013. He's made clear his priorities are extraordinary governance. That is, he was elected on a mandate of fiscal reform, and he has increased the core services of the city while reducing spending during the worst recession, of course, beginning in 2009 in the U.S. He's hired more than 900 police officers. He has opened the city's recreation centers as safe havens for young people. He's improved the fire response teams in Atlanta. He's engaged in a series of sweeping reforms, including tackling a $1.5 billion unfunded pension liability, which is the story of many local governments across the United States. He began his term facing a $48 million budget shortfall, and under his leadership, the city has had 4 years of balanced budgets with no property tax increases, and its cash reserves have grown from 7.4 million to more than 175 million. You have no idea what a mantra that is for Americans to hear that kind of a record for an urban city. So it's my great pleasure to introduce Mayor Reid to speak.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, good morning. I bring you greetings from the city of Atlanta, the home of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the Centennial Olympic Games, and the cradle of the Civil Rights Movement. We have a proud legacy of standing up for civil and human rights that we think relates directly to issues facing immigration and foreign-born individuals. I often say when I move around Atlanta that cities really are where hope meets the street. When I was listening to my colleague who was just talking, I think he summed it up well. I believe that cities are going to be where the action is, because the fact of the matter is large governments, and you can really pick the government, but certainly here in the United States, they really aren't functioning well at solving problems that impact the quality of people's lives. And so in my judgment, the business community, philanthropy, and local communities are going to act decisively to find willing partners. And in the city of Atlanta, which sits at the center of the 9th largest metropolitan economy in America, with a regional GDP of about $335 billion, if you want to take on a challenge, you need my vote and the vote of 8 people on city council. I think that that's going to be an attractive model going forward as we take on issues like immigration, but certainly a host of other issues. And so what I had in mind when I came to talk is Atlanta became what it became in America because we adopted a slogan that we were a city that was too busy to hate. But increasingly, and it's certainly appropriate right now. But increasingly, you've got to show not only are you not too busy to hate, but you've also got to care about your fellow individuals as well. And I think that that's what we all have in common in this room. So really ensuring equality for our foreign-born and immigrant populations is one of the most important challenges that we face, and how we do it will really be the measure of our success. As much as our immigrant and refugee populations need support, we also need and benefit from their involvement and from them choosing us. Economically, immigrants and foreign-born individuals help make communities that embrace them real powerhouses. For example, in our city, just 13% of the population nationally, immigrants comprise 16% of our labor force. In Georgia, my home state, foreign-born workers make up 10% of the population, but they make up 17.7% of our state's entrepreneurs. Over 40% of our Fortune 500 companies in Georgia were founded by immigrants or their children. And in our state, we have the 3rd largest concentration of Fortune 500 businesses in the United States of America. In our city, immigrants could contribute $15.7 billion in spending. And so when we really started talking about this, I decided that we needed to do more than talk about it. We needed to act decisively. So I recruited a wonderful young woman named Michelle Mazer, who helped stand up our Office of Immigrant Affairs, because we decided that we were going to fully engage in every way. This fall, our Office of Immigrant Affairs will launch the I Speak ATL initiative, which will train city staff on how to work with residents from around the world, because we want to do more than just say Atlanta is a welcoming place. We want people who come to Atlanta to have someone that they can engage with and deal with directly. English proficiency, in our judgment, will not be allowed to be a barrier to accessing city services. This fall, my team will also launch ATL in Business, an interactive digital platform that will serve as a centralized location for entrepreneurs to tap into the resources that we have available and really to become a part of the mainstream in Atlanta. These initiatives are just some of the examples that we have taken on to illustrate the fact that Atlanta is not just an international city, it is an intentional city. And we do not intend to run from these conversations. We intend to lead on them. In my judgment, it's going to be the role of leaders like me and others in America and around the world to take on this issue while our current national government is running for it. The bottom line is this is about a competition for talent. And I think that our economy is thriving right now in Atlanta, performing better than it ever has, certainly in the last 50 years, because people feel at home in our city. And so I'm going to continue to make sure that that stays so. Our Welcoming Atlanta initiative builds upon the existing priorities for our city. Public safety. I do not allow my police force to be turned into an extension of ICE. If President Trump wants to move forward with his policies, he's going to do it on his own, or he's going to get a court order to force me to do it. And I'm going to resist that vigorously. We're also going to be welcoming new arrivals. I'm also proud to be a signatory to Cities for Action, a coalition of more than 100 mayors and municipal leaders working for federal immigration reform. In 2017, the White House selected the city of Atlanta for its regional convening on New Americans as a part of the Building Welcoming Communities campaign. And we're working hard to launch inclusive policies and more programs at a local level. I have and will continue to stand shoulder to shoulder with my fellow mayors across the country as we work to make sure that beneficiaries of DACA are protected and that we resolve this current crisis in a fair way. It's going to be vital that our voices at this time activate our local communities to make sure that we don't fail during this 6-month window of time that we have. And leaders of cities are most capable with a big enough megaphone to motivate folks and make sure that we keep our eyes on the ball. The President of the United States, Barack Obama, made a commitment to these young people that if they came out of the shadows, that they would be fine. And now we are reversing that word. We are too good of people to allow that to happen. It's not right, and we're going to do something about it in the city of Atlanta. And as I close, this is what I have to say to my colleagues who care about immigration and embracing foreign-born individuals. In the city of Atlanta right now, we have the second fastest growing foreign-born population by percentage. Our economy is doing better than it has done certainly in more than 40 years. Construction levels, 4.1 billion, record high construction levels. 8 budgets in a row balanced. Population surging. And if anybody wants to figure out what side to be on this side of the argument, the only thing that they need to do is look at Atlanta and Birmingham, Alabama in 1960. By all fundamentals, the city of Birmingham, which is a wonderful, charming city, should be the most dominant economy in the Southeast because of the steel industry, but it's not. And it's not because of a man named George Wallace and a man named Bull Connor, who took positions that were divisive and small in 58, 59, 60, and 61. And as a result, the city of Atlanta had a man named Ivan Allen, who was its mayor, who testified for President Kennedy in favor of civil rights. They had a governor named Carl Sanders, and later a governor named Jimmy Carter that said segregation in the South must end. And so a shift occurred in terms of Northern capital, and they decided that Atlanta was a better place for investment in our financial centers than Birmingham. And so today, the Atlanta metropolitan economy is 3 times the size of Birmingham, Alabama's economy. This example fits precisely with the conversation that we're having today. If we choose to have a big, bold, inclusive vision of our cities, our states, from wherever we are in the world, and embrace these challenges in a way that is humane and dignified and competent, our economies are going to thrive. And morally, we're going to be in a much better position, and we're going to be rewarded for it. And that's why this conversation is so important. There have always been times in our communities where there was a fever that said that we needed to be closed and small and afraid. But there are always folks like us that were smart enough to know that that fever needed to be broken. And so this conversation today is about breaking that fever, and I hope you're for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Reid, for those inspiring remarks. I think you have redefined forever the meaning of Southern hospitality. It's a matter of spirit and a matter of growth and a matter of all getting together and making the changes you described. So thank you so much for those comments. I'm now very pleased to turn to the Lord Mayor of Kampala, Mr. Andreas Lukwago. Kampala is the largest city in Uganda. It's also a dynamic city. Mayor Lukwago was elected in 2016 with a genuine landslide, 82% of the vote. Every Democratic leader looks with envy at those kinds of numbers. And so we're very pleased to have you here. You also not only operate at the local, if Kampala can be called local, as the nation's capital level, but as a member of the Ugandan parliament. You've also been the distinguished leader of a law firm that specialized in constitutional law and human rights. So we very much welcome you here this morning to join us and look forward to your remarks.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Well, it's a great honor and privilege for me to be part of this summit, and I must extend my sincere thanks to the host city, the organizers, and all of you, dear participants. Oh. Well, as you are told, Kampala is the capital city of Uganda, and I'm the Lord Mayor. I'm serving my second term. Previously, I served as a member of parliament for Kampala Central Region. And it's the capital city of Uganda, with a population of about 1.5 million people. Those are the residents. And the day population is about 3 million people. And it's host to several immigrants and refugees from different parts of, of the region. We are located within the heart of what we call the Great Lakes region, bordering Kenya, South Sudan, DRC, Tanzania, Rwanda, and of course, there are other countries within that particular region, within East African region. But currently, Uganda is the biggest host of immigrants and refugees within the entire region. They come from all the way from Ethiopia, Eritrea, South Sudan, DRC Congo, and many other African countries. They all come and settle within Uganda, and the conditions are quite appalling. That's the biggest challenge we are facing. Because right now, Kampala, Uganda as a country, the population is about 34 million people. But we have a population of refugees alone, according to the recent census, the statistics we have, of close to 1.3 million refugees in the entire country. And many of them are concentrated in camps where the conditions are quite appalling. Countrywide, we have several camps, refugee camps, where you find provision of basic necessities of life is a huge, huge challenge. Sanitation, water, food, relief, and whatnot. These are all challenges we're trying to grapple with. We are a signatory to international instruments like International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, Social and Cultural Rights, and many others. And of course, we have domesticated most of these international instruments, but we are yet to get off the ground to have them implemented. And we have been, yes, assisted by UNHCR and other international organizations, but the situation is still dire, given the challenge we are facing. And recently we received the reports that the government actually is in negotiation with Israel to resettle about 1,500 immigrants, illegal immigrants, what they call illegal immigrants in Israel to Uganda. Those who entered from Ethiopia, Eritrea, and they have been going to Israel. Now there are negotiations with the government of Uganda to resettle them in Uganda. And that puts a lot of pressure on the resources we have. As a country, we have a very, very small budget. The GDP of the country is about 25 billion US dollars, the entire country. And for Kampala, our budget alone, the running budget for us to operate and provide all the necessary the services in Kampala, the entire budget is about 100 million US dollars. You can imagine a city operating on just 100 million US dollars a year to handle that huge, huge influx of refugees from various parts of, from different countries. And when they come and settle in these camps, they find the conditions unbearable. They are forced to come and integrate and mix with the communities, the host communities in the Kampala, where provision of social services is still a very, very big challenge. Bottom line is, Uganda has adopted an open door policy on refugees. The borders are porous, it's free entry, but when they come, the biggest challenge is on how to provide the best amenities of life. Fast forward, what are we doing as a country? We and the city, we have adopted the comprehensive refugee response framework that was developed by UNHCR as part of the New York Declaration on Refugees and Migrants. We have adopted it as a country. And we hope to benefit from this summit on how best, we need to get the best practices on how to domesticate it and implement it locally in Uganda, that CRR framework. It is still a very, very big challenge given the constraints I've highlighted above. But we intend to benefit from this by working out mechanisms of ensuring that we can get assistance on how to develop policies geared towards implementing that framework, how to work out modalities that would enhance resilience and self-reliance of the refugees, expand solutions including like third-party country options, and also things like building capacity of these various institutions we have locally that are helping us to deal with this crisis. Finally, the element of integration within society is still a very, very... You've had cases of xenophobia. Yes, they are not on the scale like you've witnessed in South Africa and elsewhere, but it is still a very, very big... Xenophobia is still a very, very big problem on the African continent. How to deal with that? We need to benchmark from you the best practices you can advise us on, and of course, how we can generate the adequate, the necessary resources to deal with this challenge. Otherwise, I thank you very much, and we hope to benefit quite a lot from our interaction with you, colleagues and members. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, for those remarks. You highlight for us many important issues, but amongst them, I think one that we need to keep in mind. Yes, please. The floor is back to you.
Okay.
Yes.
Just one little thing, the long-term solution we need to deal with, honorable members here, the civil unrest within the region, the political instabilities we are witnessing, constitutional instabilities. We have a very, very big problem. These nascent democracies being nurtured to become very strong like the Western democracies we are having, that can help us address the question of civil conflicts, civil unrest, turbulence, and whatnot. It's still a very, very big challenge in the entire region. Uganda, Kenya, South Sudan, Rwanda, Burundi, and all those countries within that region and beyond the entire African continent. It is still a very, very big challenge. So in as long as we have not addressed these fundamental issues of rule of law, constitutionalism, good governance, we shall still be faced with this challenge of dealing with refugees. I thank you very much.
Good. Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. The points you made were many and very interesting, but one that struck home most to me is that not all cities, needless to say, are in the same position. And cities in the developing world face budgetary constraints and political environments which pose extreme challenges to the kind of civic responsibility as well as welcoming attitude that you've just expressed right there. And one message, I think, to all the cities is solidarity. That is, that the situations in Atlanta, in Bristol, and as we may hear for a moment, in Altena, are quite different. But cities need to stand together. We have a common interest in human dignity as all fellow members of our global community. And all the cities don't hang together or hang separately, but they do feel the need to address problems in a common way. Problems not addressed in one part of the world will show up in another part of the world, and that's the message of both refugees and migration. So I'm also pleased to introduce the fourth of the mayors on this distinguished panel, Mayor Andreas Holstein of Altena. He comes from a fascinating environment, a small town, much smaller than the cities we've heard so far, a city that had, if I've got the numbers correctly, 22,000 people in 1999, and then had 17 years later, 17,500 people. So we're facing a different circumstance of a town that was declining in demographics, but in no other way was it declining from the story that I've read. Mayor Holstein brings a distinguished career as working with the CDU-CSU faction in the German Bundestag as an advisor on social welfare and benefits for asylum seekers. He was the honorary deputy mayor of the city of Altena from 1994 until he was elected then mayor of the city in 1999. While there, seeing the decline in population of his city, he saw this not as a tragedy, but as an opportunity when in 2015, 1 million plus asylum seekers showed up in Germany. Mayor Holstein said this is an opportunity to welcome them to his small city, but at the same time, knowing how much work needed to be done to produce successful integration. I'm not sure what he's going to say, but I don't want to step on what he is going to say, so I'm going to turn the floor over to him to a moment. But I just want to note that he won the National Integration Prize and received 10,000 euros for the efforts of his city, awarded by Chancellor Angela Merkel. So he clearly did a good job in what he's going to tell us about. So, Mayor Holstein, the floor is yours.
Excellencies, dear colleagues and ladies and gentlemen, in my opinion, personally, climate change and the migration are belonging together and are the biggest challenges globally seen in the century we are. Altena is, as mentioned, not very important. It's standing in the panel today for the small and medium-sized cities of the world. We are not political important. We are not in the middle of interest of the public, but the small and medium-sized cities are numerous. That's our weight in the world. If you allow me, I would like to make 3 remarks. The containment of migration and the rules are international and national duty. This is the role of our governments, but the people who are coming as a result of war, crime and hunger, they are coming to us locally. They live in our communities. They are reality in our lives in the cities. Therefore, we are on a local level responsible for the success of the global mega challenge migration. Germany took in 2015 over 1 million refugees, an enormous number, a big challenge for the whole country and the German cities, and of course our citizens. In my town, we don't divide the refugees in vulnerable and refugees with a status. No matter what status, we don't want is a parallel society in our town. And we like that there is, if it's possible, no segregation in our town. These are our goals. For all groups, we are serving language courses starting the first day in our town, not paid, done by volunteers. Most of them have a volunteer who knows our town and acts like a godfather. Housing is decentralized. The refugees, even the vulnerable refugees, live in normal flats with normal neighbors. Short, we try to act as a welcoming city. This means we are fully responsible and accept them as new society members. And we hope that we can make them to citizens in Altena one day if they are allowed to stay. Why? Migration has a long history all over the world and especially in Europe. It was always a big challenge for the cities. But cities, and you mentioned it before, cities which are willing to integrate foreign people and who did a great work in that were successfully in the past. And after the process, they were stronger and more successful than others, like you mentioned. Up to today, it's a win-win situation shortly. Especially before the background of the demographics change in the northern industrial states, it is with much sense to be active in integrating refugees in our countries and especially in our towns. Integration is not working without the active help of the society. Volunteers and professionals must work hand in hand. To create fast language skills is extremely important. Children need places in kindergartens and schools. The parents had to get integrated in work. We need to explore their skills. We need to qualify them. We have to try to improve their professions. But it's not a one-way situation. We have to get to know other religions, other traditions, and to respect a new culture in our cities. Integration is, in my eyes, an enormous task, but we will manage it, and our cities will be richer and stronger after the process. It is important for our global future. Second remark, the allocation of refugees is working according to the will of states. Look to the problem in Europe between the border states and the Middle East European states in the distribution of refugees. But concerning are the cities and the citizens on a local level. Many refugees are going in the mega cities. These have difficulties with housing and segregation. If there would be a national budget or international budget for refugees, which covers more than the cost. Small and medium-sized cities could take refugees on a voluntary basis. This would reduce prejudice, increase acceptance among citizens, because the world may be better infrastructure for the whole city. Third remark, and the last remark, we need more international exchange in integration methods and techniques. In Europe, the OECD is working on a study of a topic with 10 cities. Legal question are international or belong to the state level, but the task of integration is nearly the same in all our cities, even bigger and smaller ones. So we have to learn from each other, and we need a very good and very effective network. Thank you.
Mayor Holstein, thank you again for those remarks. It emphasizes again the different positions of cities and the way in which, if they work together, we're likely to get much better outcomes, not for migrants, for asylum seekers, for the cities themselves. They each can have a role to play, but not all cities are the same. And so from national budgetary support, small and medium-sized cities like Altona could step up and play a much larger role, making it easier for big cities to play their role in integrating asylum seekers and migrants into their countries. We're pretty much on schedule, which is very good, which means that we have time for questions and answers. I'm going to open the floor to any comments, questions that would care to be posed by the room. Please identify yourself when you pose your question. I think there is a microphone that's available that would right over here. Please, and signal for it. Okay. I've had someone who has requested the floor first, the mayor of Claxton, Georgia, Mr. Mayor Terry. Mr. Mayor Terry, there, please. And so think of your questions or comments while he's asking his.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Doyle. First off, it's an honor and a privilege to be amongst a group of esteemed mayors and colleagues. I had the opportunity to go to the first summit in Berlin just a few months ago, and it's a privilege to be here again. I wanted to just actually echo and sort of reinforce the words of Mayor Kasim Reid. Clarkston is in the metropolitan Atlanta region. In fact, I'm just a 15-minute drive from Atlanta City Hall. And I actually knew Mayor Kasim Reid when he was a state senator years ago, and was proud to be a supporter of his when he was at 4% in the polls way back in the 2007 campaign. It worked out good, yeah. Elections matter, they really do. And so I wanted to maybe just reinforce what the mayor of Altona also said about small cities and large cities working together. I'm very happy to be able to work with Mayor Reid's Office of Immigrant Affairs, Michelle and Louisa, as partners in making Atlanta a more welcoming environment. We have 90 municipalities in the metropolitan region. Atlanta is the big city, but we have a lot of small cities as well. And the resources and the networks that they provide small town mayors are just so crucial and so important. And I think as we move forward, thinking about how the large and the small cities, the medium-sized cities, can all work together, have those cultural exchanges, share resources and ideas, and create a region-wide welcoming atmosphere for immigrants and refugees. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much for that comment. The floor is open for anyone who would care to pose a question or make a comment. The gentleman in the middle right there. Yes.
Hello. My name is Ram Chalore. I'm from Princeton, New Jersey. My question is to the Atlanta mayor. Among all the other mayors in the country, when they are trying to oppose the Department of Justice rule that they would cancel funding if they don't provide information on prisoners to be released with access to ICE. But to me, it looks like the funding cut to be much smaller. So why would you care?
I wouldn't. I mean, first of all, I think that Mayor Emanuel in Chicago showed very strong and able leadership in really leading on this issue around the threat that individuals that embraced immigrants and foreign-born individuals were going to be punished. And so, as you know, the initial decision regarding that policy has been stayed. But speaking directly to your question, it didn't change our behavior one bit. I never bought it. And I thought, and I took the position that that is a challenge that we would have leaned into because it would have elevated the conversation nationally. And candidly, I mean, governments increasingly are more talk than they are resources at the national level. And so I think that, this is just a situation that goes to who we are as a city, as a state, and as a people. And I just don't believe you can back away from it. I think the debate we're having in this room right now, in 10 and 20 and 30 years, is going to be as important as the debate around whether women should have the right to vote, or whether the civil rights movement should have been passed, or whether gays should be able to marry who they love. On all of these issues, I mean, you just need to take a stand and hold your position and understand the consequences come with them. So I was proud of what Rahm Emanuel did because Chicago identifies itself as a sanctuary city. We take the approach that we are a welcoming city because we believe that that achieves the objectives that we want to achieve. But the bottom line is that what is needed right now is candor. And so when folks contact us about having our police department coordinate with ICE, the answer is my police department is meant to protect people in the city of Atlanta. And unless you want to, take over my police budget and fund it, then you should. And so that's the position. And we need to be clear. Mayors have to use our voices. When I listen to my colleagues, their policy positions are so right. But what's happening to us on this issue is we're being out-passioned. You have a bunch of folks that have very mean motivations on the other side. And we're going to have to meet that intensity with an intensity for right. I apologize for speaking so long.
Thank you. Thank you. Mayor Reese of Bristol would like to address a similar issue. Please, Mr. Mayor.
Well, on your last point, it seems you're from Atlanta. I'm a big fan of Dr. King. Reminds me of him warning us that people of ill will have been much more effective at using time than people of goodwill. So as this moral challenge takes place, we got with you on the front foot. It might just be interesting to know of something that didn't quite come off, but I thought was a very interesting conversation that was taking place among myself and some colleagues on the Global Parliament of Mayors. As we watched the threats from the federal government against US mayors that were not going to go along with their approach to migrants, we had a conversation around could we source some money and make a financial contribution. Now, it would not have been of a scale of finance that would have covered the withdrawal of any federal money, but it would have been a very powerful gesture. And I think the excitement is what would be the implications of cities around the world saying we will not just make moral statements about our alignment to where you are, but we are going to make resources available to sustain you in upholding your city sovereignty, so you can shape what goes on inside your boundaries. Now, I said logistically it wasn't possible to do it, but I think what it potentially opens the door to is a very interesting and I think exciting and progressive approach to the way we think about doing city governance in the future and where our alliances are.
Thank you very much for those comments. I'd like to pose a question to the panel before I go back to the audience. And that is, very eloquently this morning, we have heard about the burdens that national governments can impose upon cities. Everything from the challenges to sanctuary to the dreamers, et cetera. We've also heard about some of the benefits and the support that national governments can provide for cities. From the mayor of Altena, we've heard how his integration was made more feasible by support from the federal government. My question to the mayors assembled here and anyone who would want to comment from the audience is, what, if anything, are you looking for from the global level, the multilateral level, that is the UN system? What, is there anything that would be positive to assist you? And in particular, what is it that you might like to see in the global compacts that are being prepared by Mrs. Arbour for migrants and by led by Mr. Grandi for refugees? What's your wish list? What would you like to see in this document, if you have some thoughts on that question? And it's addressed to any and all the mayors right here.
Our wish list, my wish list would be really identifying folks like my colleagues who are doing it the best, to really define the issues that come with having a forward-leaning position around foreign-born individuals, and then having an organization that is well-sourced as this one really identify who is doing concrete work that's delivering concrete results. Because when you are a mayor, you have a shelf life and an end date. So to the extent that you are able to identify people that are doing concrete work, it saves me 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 24 months if I can pick up the phone and call the mayor of Altima who dealt with these issues at an important time. But what we need from you all really is a platinum standard of who is doing the best work, so that we don't waste our time on well-meaning individuals who aren't delivering concrete results.
Mine specifically relates to what I earlier on highlighted, the question of implementing the framework, the refugee response framework, the CRRF, which was earlier on adopted by the New York Declaration here. In light of the peculiar challenges we are facing on the African continent, because it emphasizes the issue of integration, provision of adequate facilities and whatnot. Like in situations like we are grappling with in Kampala and most of the cities on the African continent, where you have those budgetary constraints and yet you have an open door policy, how do you handle this? How are we going to implement the principles enshrined within that framework? That's my biggest challenge, because the will is there, but the capacity may not be available. They exert pressure on inadequate facilities. How do we handle that? Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yes, Mayor Holstein.
In my eyes, we need a platform to exchange best practice exchange and also the possibility to meet each other from the mega cities down to the smaller cities. And what we need from the United Nations is a framework, standards. We need standards in this question. We are not at the point that we have worldwide the same standards of humanity, and this is a pity. We need the same standards all over the world. And it's not a decision, in my eyes, of governments all over the world. It's a question of the worldwide community. And this is a solution which has to be done here in New York for all over the world.
And I'd appreciate what Mayor Reid said, just about having best practice and making that available. There aren't many new ideas, so people have done it before, and just finding a place to share those around would be very valuable. I'm also minded, again, we got to recognise as well that some cities are wealthier than others. To get by on £100 million a year, to me, would be a ferocious challenge. And as I understand it, I think about 80% of money spent on migrants and refugees is actually in the wealthiest countries in the world. So we have to think about how do we work as a collection of cities to redistribute some of that spend, so that we not only do we put the resource in that's needed, but spend it in the right place in the right way at the right time. And again, approaching this as a global collection of cities, I think could help that. And by the way, I'm not saying cities are the magic pill. I'm just thinking that it's an untapped resource at the moment in the way the world is being run. I was interested, someone mentioned earlier on the idea of some kind of global budget to be spent like that. Again, you know, could cities spend money on that? But I'm minded of something that Ben Barber said, you know, cities are not just a topic to be discussed, they are a layer of governance and should be treated as such. So from the multilateral institutions, I'd like them to request and secure a place at the table for city leaders alongside and on an equal footing to national leaders. And I think that when we think about organizations, funders that want to spend money on this area, that they don't just think about spending money on the causes, but they think about spending money on governance. So rather than just bypassing local governance structures, they're investing in the intelligence and the ability of those governance structures, so that when that money is gone, or when the person decides this is no longer their flavor issue of the year or the month, and I don't want to undermine those philanthropists that do spend money, but when they move on, there is a sustainable structure of governance in place that can run the place well. But spending money on governance is not as sexy, as it were, as spending money on the issue, is it? But that's what we've got to get people to. It's a bit more mature, though.
Thank you very much for that ambitious agenda, which I'm sure will be heard at the right level. So thank you. I'm back to the floor. I would take the lady in the red dress right in the middle, and then we'll go around for others that have put their hand up. Yes.
Thank you very much. And it's always refreshing to speak and hear from mayors. My name is Verena Knaus. I'm Senior Advisor for Migration with Unicef. And just bear with me, it's 2 weeks I'm in New York. And I've been following the migration debates from Brussels for the last 5 years. So a lot of the criticism that was rightfully said about backstepping and going back from commitments made, I've been at the center of it. But I think we can sort of build on the refreshing enthusiasm that we just heard. I just wanted to ask a question that relates to children. You've talked about the need for social policies at work, for solutions that actually reach people's lives. And when it comes to children, most people would agree, yes, that we want to have policies at work for children, whether they are refugees, whether they are migrants, whether they will have a right to stay or not. There's this one particular issue when it comes to child protection, protecting and preventing violence against children. And yet, in almost every country, we seem to have double standards. So there is reception standards for national children, but very different care standards for non-national children. We seem to agree that detaining a child that we pick up on the street is the wrong thing. But when it comes to a refugee or migrant child, detaining the child seems like a better solution than leaving the child on the street. So I'm just wondering, is there room that mayors could lend their voice to the global discussions on the summits, that a child is a child, no matter where they come from, and that starting from there, we can actually look for those practical solutions and offer them and find the ways to share them more. Because at the level of integrating children, this is where integration starts. So it's an invitation and a question to where you see we can support you and what you can do to make the view that children are children, no matter where they come from, somehow reflected in the global compacts on migration and refugees. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would anyone of the mayors want to respond to that question or comment? Okay, I think you just got agreement across the group of mayors. I'd now like to turn to the Vice President of the Sus Massa region, Mr. Ahmed Ez-Zahidi, who has asked for the floor. Do we have a translator? Okay, good, please. We do.
Bonjour, hello everybody. Maître Zahidi, vice-président région Sus Massa, Morocco. Africa. La première des choses, je veux dire que les interprètes, ils ont discuté pas mal de choses concernant la thématique de migration. Ils ont évoqué beaucoup de problèmes. La question qui se pose, nous, on est là pour trouver des solutions. On n'est pas ici pour dire voilà l'origine de la problématique. Il y a chaque pays, on a des constitutions. Et la constitution, dans tous les pays, elle évoque dans son préambule le respect des droits de l'homme et aussi le respect de toute charte concernant l'humanité. Alors là, il faut travailler là-dessus. Il nous faut il nous faut un lobbying sur cette thématique. Le travail aussi doit être au niveau national et au niveau régional et au niveau local. vis-à-vis des textes de loi. Donc chaque pays... Okay.
Okay, we raised a lot of questions here, but the problem is we have to find solution. Each country has a different constitution, so we have to take that into consideration. To work in terms of human rights, I think we need to work together. And what was your question again?
La question est comment chercher un lobbying pour la transformation de ces chartes en texte.
Yeah. So the question is how to find lobby to resolve the question, to find a solution to the issue. And is it on the field, sur le terrain, on the field? Yeah, at a national level.
Okay.
Une autre chose. Il ne faut pas oublier, on parle de la migration. On a les immigrés de retour. Aussi, il faut trouver des solutions pour les immigrés de retour.
Don't forget we have immigrants that are coming back. We have to find a solution from them as well.
Good. Thank you very much for those comments. I think we're being asked to make suggestions about how at the local level one can achieve a voice that will be heard at the global level. What sort of strategies, techniques, styles will enable that voice to be heard? And particularly an attention to a question that's sometimes neglected but is very important, which is returnees to go back to their countries. Do any of the mayors have any suggestions on that particular issue? Yes, please.
I think that that the best path is action, because action, when you take on this issue, whether it is turning your libraries that are typically dispersed throughout cities into places that interact with foreign-born individuals, or whether you're protecting certain policies from notarios or people who use notaries inappropriately. Every time a city acts somewhere in the world, they create a path that can be replicated, and it shows will. And the best thing about being a mayor, and I've been at this about 7 years, is if you get a phone call from another mayor, you typically answer it, and you will provide the best knowledge and staff to your mayoral colleague. I mean, this is like Coca-Cola calling up Pepsi and saying, hey, you know, what's your best drink? And you sending your team over and trying to help Pepsi. I'm just trying to put it in a frame, being from Atlanta, that folks will remember. So I think that when people act decisively, the things that work, we need to record and we need to talk about, which is why meetings like today are important. And then other leaders around the world need to feel very comfortable engaging and asking for help. So one of the conversations that we're having as a sidebar here is a global parliament of mayors that's taken on this challenge. And that will create the safe space to talk about these things just in a transparent way. I know my friends who are in government know what it is just to be able to pick up the phone and call somebody that's dealing with what you're dealing with. I can't say how much time that takes off the problem. So action, action, action. Record the results, save the results, share the results along with your team. And I think that's a real force multiplier.
Thank you. Mayor Holstein?
With my experience of 18 years as mayor, it is that you locally knew your neighbors on a government level, you know in your state, your friends and other mayors who make best practice, but you even know in European Union nobody who is doing on a small and medium-sized town a good practice in Spain, for example, or in Italy. Therefore, we need a platform, that's first, and the second one, at an advisor structure to build a community, a parliament of mayors of bigger and smaller towns, and to give a political voice to the cities. It's necessary. And if Benjamin Barber is right with his picture that mayors, and it's not the mayors or mayoress, it's the people rule the world. It's more basic, it's more democratic, and we get new functions as governments and even on the multinational level.
Thank you very much. I'd now like to turn to the Vice Mayor of Paris, who indicated a willingness to speak.
Hello. I'm Dominique Versini, Deputy Mayor of Paris. Well, as my English is not fluent, I will speak in French. And you will... well... bon, ils ont compris. Bah, ils ont compris. Well, it's a joke, it's a joke. Merci à tous, thank you very much. Merci à tous pour cet échange, c'est très riche. Moi, je comprends que vous, les maires, notamment américains, anglais, Monsieur Reid, vous avez parlé beaucoup des migrants, mais j'ai pas très bien compris si les migrants sont en situation légale ou illégale. Parce qu'en France, c'est une vraie question. Parce que, bien sûr, les maires, et vous imaginez bien que la maire de Paris a du pouvoir, hein, ne peuvent pas aller contre la volonté de l'État. Peut-être ça, vous pouvez le traduire.
I would like to thank you. So you guys talk about migrants. We'd like to know if they are legal or illegal, because in France, it's different.
En Allemagne, Monsieur le maire, donc Holstein, c'est vrai, vous avez accueilli 1 million de personnes, mais en réalité, c'est 650 000 qui sont restés. Il y a eu quand même des gens reconduits. Donc, c'est une vraie question. Je pense que...
In Germany, you welcome 1 million and 650,000 stay. So I think it's a real question.
Because en Europe, nous avons la question de qui reste et qui ne reste pas. Donc, les maires ont des valeurs humanistes, mais le gouvernement et la loi nous empêchent d'aller jusqu'au bout. Et il y a des gens qui sont reconduits en Italie, en Grèce et dans d'autres pays encore, puisqu'on sait qu'il y a des accords qui sont en train de se faire au-delà de la mer.
The question is to stay or not to stay. Some people are sent in other countries, like in Italy or Greece.
And Afghanistan.
And Afghanistan.
Yes. Donc, effectivement, ma question est comment est-ce que vous faites par rapport à la loi? Parce qu'en France, c'est impossible d'empêcher le gouvernement de reconduire des gens ailleurs, même s'ils se sont intégrés, même s'ils parlent français, même si les enfants vont à l'école.
Well, the question is to know how do you guys deal at a legal level? Because in France, it's impossible.
C'est impossible.
It's impossible in France to send people regardless of the law.
Par exemple, des habitants hébergent des migrants chez eux et la police, la justice les condamne. Donc parce qu'on a parlé de valeurs humanistes. Et donc, c'est vrai qu'on a besoin, comme l'a dit le maire Holstein, de valeurs humanistes communes. C'est pour ça qu'on a besoin d'un réseau de maires et qu'on a besoin de se sentir solidaire.
You can be welcomed by somebody, but the justice can be against it. So that's why we need all the mayors to work together.
Par exemple, une question très simple. Moi, je ne sais pas si je dois apprendre le français à quelqu'un avant qu'il ait le statut régulier. Le gouvernement ne veut pas. Nous, on le fait, mais vous voyez, c'est des questions assez simples. Mais j'ai l'impression que c'est pas un problème pour vous, en fait.
For example, I would like to teach French to somebody, but the government doesn't want it, so that's the type of question, I don't know how you guys deal with that.
Voilà.
Thank you very much for those comments. I think some of the challenges that are being posed for our mayors is how one deals with incompatibilities in the law at the national level and the local level. From the standpoint of human solidarity and from the standpoint of mayoral good governance, cities will want to act. Yet at the national level, there are laws that restrict that or fail to facilitate that kind of engagement. And I was wondering how one should relate to this disconnect between some national legislation and the demands of local governance at the mayoral level. And I was wondering if there are any further comments on that particular issue. Yes, Mayor Holstein.
That's a practical question which is very necessary because our lawyers and the justice need too many time or too long time to decide whether someone has to go back or stay. I think in the moment when people are coming to us, they have the right to be equal, treated equal, even their children. But it's not full sense if you allow someone to stay 8 years in a country and then to send him back. That's not sensible. It's not economic. It's not full of human rights. It's against human rights. You have to be faster. The problem, for example, in Germany is that we have no legal migration on a humanitarian base. So people are coming because of hunger and poor poverty to Germany and stay there and try to stay as long as they can to help their families abroad. And after some years, they are pressured to go back with all humanitarian things you can see. And that's the same in the whole Europe. And this is without sense, and there we need a solution, better solutions.
No, but we are not talking about the same person. I was talking about the new incomers that arrived in at 2015, coming from Afghanistan, Sudan, and Eritrea. Because in France there are not many people from Syria, and I think there are two debates, and there is the debate of the migrants that are here from many years, from Morocco, Mali, and so on. And of course, at the end, they finish by stay in the country. But now, for my part, my problem is about the new incomers that arrived with the recent flux of migrants, and it's really a political question, because they are not treated as the other migrants, the historical migrants from Africa, North Africa, and so on. It's different. The question is, if you are not, for example, put your hand at the, if you don't belong to the Dublin Agreement, you can't stay in France. You have to go back to Italy or to Greece. Yeah. It's the same in Germany. But if you have been, for example, rejected in Germany, of course, France will raccompagner la personne, transfer the person. So it's a very sensible question at the moment, because there are very few people who can stay, only 15 who are not Dublin or rejected in another country. That's the question. And
the Dublin regime is not fitting. And that's the answer.
And we need to change the Dublin, yes.
Very short.
But it's impossible to stay. If the government decide to reconduct somebody, he has to leave. Yeah. No mayor in France can
protect them.
Yes, yeah. It's impossible.
In Germany too, you can't protect them, and you have the problems that you have volunteers who are taking care about the people, and they are engaged not by reasons of money, by heart. And if they had to go back, for example, to Hungary or back to Greece, it's a pity. And I feel ashamed over the situation we have in Europe now. That's not my Europe, and that's not my opinion how we have to deal with the question of
but I agree
problems
with you, of course.
Great. Thank you very much. There are other questions and comments, I'm sure, in the audience, and I apologize to those that we have not reached. We've reached the point in our schedule where we need to move on. I'm going to turn over the chair in just a moment to my colleague, Dr. Colleen Thuez. I would say that the co-host of this meeting are those of us who you see on the logos at the top, but I would say that much of the real work and the success of this meeting has been done by some colleagues here at IPI and my colleagues at Columbia, like Maggie Powers and others. But Colleen has been the Sadi Carnot, the organizer of victory of this particular meeting. And so I'm very pleased to turn it over to Colleen, who will moderate the next part of our panel this morning.
Thank you very much, Michael. Thank you. And I did have prepared remarks, which I have to put aside, very inspired by the motion and the speaking from the heart from the mayors on this panel. Only to say that there are a few of us who have been working 6 or 7 years now at the United Nations to make sure that mayors' voices are heard on this subject. And this summit is a reflection of that work, and we are absolutely thrilled to have you here. Migration is a subject, obviously, of great importance at the United Nations, and we see it reflected now in the leadership of the United Nations by a Secretary General who formerly led the High Commissioner for Refugees. We heard from the President of the General Assembly just last week that migration is one of the top priorities for the Assembly this year. And the main organization that deals with migration, the IOM, is now a formal member of the UN system. What all of that means, we'll see, but we finally have a declaration, the New York Declaration that we've heard about this morning, that calls on the wisdom of cities, and states are finally turning to cities to hear what they have to say. We're very glad to tell you that the outcomes of this summit will be shared as part of the consultative process. That might be 19th century diplomacy, Mayor Reid, but we still hold value very much in this multilateral world that we have, and the input that you city leaders can provide and share with the rest of us. So without further ado, we will pass the floor to the High Commissioner for Refugees, Mr. Filippo Grandi, for his statement. If you wouldn't mind taking the floor at the podium there. Commissioner Grandi is the 11th High Commissioner, and he was elected by the General Assembly to a 5-year term that will end in 2020. He runs, for those of you who do not know, UNHCR, the largest humanitarian organization. It is one that has won the Nobel Peace Prize twice. It has 15,000 people working within it in 128 countries and protects and assists about 60 million refugees. High Commissioner, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody, and many thanks to IPI for hosting us here, and to the other numerous sponsors for organizing this very important conference. Last year, of course, at the General Assembly, migration and refugees were a very, very strong focus. This was the first General Assembly after the big flow of people into Europe. And of course, there was a lot of interest around this issue. So I think, and I'm saying this in every place I've been speaking in the last couple of days, I think it's good that we help keep that focus alive. Because frankly speaking, we shouldn't take that for granted. There has been already a decline in attention. And I think that it is important that this doesn't happen. And we're all working, or many of us are working, of course, in the establishment of the global compacts next year on refugees and migrants. And in order for that process to be successful, we need to maintain interest and focus. So it's good that you have taken this initiative. forced displacement. I deal with one particular angle of that population, those population movements. Forced displacement is, of course, at its peaks since we started measuring it. We estimate about 66 million refugees, internally displaced people. So it's a large figure, it's many times bigger than it was, say, 20 years ago. And I don't need to tell you the causes that push people, conflict combined increasingly with other factors that make addressing those flows increasingly complicated. And I think it's also good that you're having this discussion on cities. In fact, I wish I could have spoken to you at the beginning. I'm sure that you've already gone into a lot of the things that I wanted to tell you, but let me say how important it is that you focus on cities. In fact, I came from Stockholm just 2 days ago, where we had another discussion on cities, migration and refugees. So I think it's good that this debate takes place, because I don't think that cities are the new frontier of dealing with forced population movement, but the recognition that they are that frontier is growing. And that is important, because I think cities need support, and cities can support how we deal with this matter. So the urban factor, we can say, and I talk about our angle of forced displacement, the urban factor is growing in so many different ways. I don't know what you have been discussing, but the last piece of discussion I heard was very much cities receiving refugees and migrants. Actually, the relationship between cities and forced displacement is quite complex if you think about it. Many of the people, of those 66 million, are people fleeing from cities, are urban people fleeing from cities with their own set of needs and challenges. Many times, many of them flee from cities that have been completely destroyed. When the debate raged here in the United States in February, March, at the beginning of this administration, I thought that the best thing I could do to show what it meant being a refugee was to go to the symbolically most destroyed cities that had produced refugees in the last few years, Aleppo. And I thought that standing in front of the ruins of Aleppo and speaking about that would send a strong message. This is where many people fleeing are coming from cities where they had a normal life, and that normal life had been wiped away by war. Many of these 66 million not only come from cities, but flee to cities. And of course, many of you here will think of cities in North America, cities in Europe. In fact, most of them flee to cities in countries that are poor or middle income. These are the cities that are most challenged by refugee flows. Many of those 66 million, hopefully, will return to their homes eventually when problems are resolved. And when they will return to cities. Returning to cities is a big challenge. We see this, for example, in Afghanistan. We see it in Somalia. Even people that do not come from cities, when they return to their countries, they go to cities. They become part of an urbanization program that poses, in the case of poor countries, deprived of resources, immense challenges of rehabilitation and reconstruction. And finally, even for people who do not go back, and this concerns many of you here, most of these 66 million, most of the 66 million that will not go back to their countries will settle in cities. So the cities are an important factor in the journey or the residence of these people that we're talking about. We estimate that of the 66 million, as we speak, 70 to 80% are located in urban center. And this, of course, poses all the challenges that you, especially the mayors, know very well. Challenges of identifying who the people are and where they are. Challenges of structures, public structures, education and health, that are burdened by an additional population, often with very particular needs, challenges of rejection on the part of communities hosting them that in their worst manifestations can become xenophobia and politically charged manifestations. I think that if you frame from the urban perspective the phenomenon of forced displacement, you realize that much of the traditional discourse on how you respond to population flow, to forced population flow, is dated. You know, ask anybody the first image that they have when they speak about refugees, they will tell you a refugee camp. In fact, it's a minority, a decreasing minority of refugees that end up in refugee camps. An increasing majority end up, in fact, in cities. So we need to really retailor, redesign our responses to this new reality. And what we have been really working on very hard in the past couple of years, especially in the discussion around the Global Compact, is to develop thinking and practices around inclusion. When you're not in a camp with dedicated services and basically isolated from the community, when you are in the community, especially in urban communities, the most important form of protection that you can offer to people arriving, fleeing from war, from persecution, from violence, is to make sure that as soon as possible, and you know that very well, they are included. And inclusions, of course, inclusion needs appropriate policies on the part of the cities, a legal frame to the extent possible. I think this is what the deputy mayor of Paris was alluding to, and adequate structures. You know, a lot of this thinking around these issues was conducted around the Syria crisis. The Syria crisis was a turning point in so many ways, not only because of its size, you know, 5 million refugees, 6 million displaced, not only because of its seemingly intractable character, but also because so many, or a number, not so many, a number of the Syrians moved on towards Europe, leading that big flow of 2015 and 16. This actually was a rather dramatic phenomenon. It had some negative effect, but it also helped frame the debate in a different way around inclusion. Not only in Europe, which you're all experts on, but also inclusion in places where our people become refugees for the first time. For the Syrian crisis, this means Lebanon, this means Jordan, this means Turkey. And this is where the debate has flourished. This is where we have seen for the first time ever interventions of a different nature. The involvement of the World Bank in a situation of forced displacement, not only that, but in middle-income countries like Lebanon and Jordan, has been really groundbreaking. And it has focused on the areas that are most important for inclusion, education and employment in particular, with results that are still very mixed, but that are important precedents. I mentioned at the beginning that we are working on the Global Compact on Refugees. Now, the Global Compact on Refugees and the Global Compact on Migration, that will be its companion piece, rest on the New York Declaration of last year, which many of you will be familiar with, and rest on a number of key concepts. One of them being that responses to refugee crisis should be as comprehensive as possible. And we are testing the new model proposed by the declaration in countries that are very diverse, from Uganda and Ethiopia to countries in Central America, which I have just visited. And we're hoping to develop this model in places in Asia. As a matter of fact, I said yesterday to some colleagues in the UN that we should actually be testing that model in Bangladesh today to address the flow of refugees from Myanmar, the Rohingya refugees. This is where really we should do that. There are many complexities and many difficulties, but this is what we are testing now. Now, when we talk about comprehensive responses, we talk not only of involvement of a larger number of donors and actors, but also about a greater coalition of responders. Not only, as was traditionally the case before, governments, United Nations, and NGOs, but a much larger, broader array of entities, realities that can contribute to better responses in refugee crisis. I'm talking of the private sector. I'm just coming from the Concordia event in which we spoke about that. Very useful in the whole areas of employment, of business model in responding to crisis. I'm talking about sport. 2 days ago, I was in Lima, Peru, where I launched together with the International Olympic Committee a new foundation to promote sport as an important response to a refugee crisis. A very, very interesting new dimensions. I'm talking about faith leaders that, for example, in Central America are at the front line of the response in respect of the crisis from the Northern Triangle of that region. So we're really expanding to new partners this response in the spirit of what we call whole of society response to refugee flows. And in this context, and this is my concluding point, cities are absolutely crucial. Cities are absolutely crucial because if inclusion is the future name of the game in terms of protection, cities are where it must happen, are where it should happen. Actually, it is where, when it is happening, it is happening. And like I said, this means really developing policies and practices that can be useful. We at UNHCR, I'm making an offer now, are very interested in talking to cities. You know, we have every year a meeting with our board of states. We call it executive committee. I was thinking that maybe we should establish another executive committee of cities that are hosting refugees and which advise us on how to deal with this matter. So stay tuned with us because I think we're very interested in developing policies, in developing best practices in dealing with inclusion. I was recently in Mexico, as I said, and we signed an agreement with the mayor of, I think maybe there's somebody here from Mexico City. We just signed an agreement on how to deal with refugees from Central America that is very groundbreaking. And of course, the cities can be catalytic also in bringing other actors on the scene. And one more point that I wanted to make in terms of the role of the cities. The cities can be very important, cities that are successful or have pioneered practices in integrating refugees can be very important in joining efforts to help cities that lack resources to do that. You know, not so long ago, I had a great conversation with the mayor of Madrid. And she told me that she had been urging her government to do more in terms of helping refugees, but she was a bit frustrated by the lack of action. So she had decided to take things in her hands, not just in terms of creating structure to absorb refugees in her city, but also twinning her city with other cities, in particular in the Middle East, to bring resources and lessons learned to other places, to other cities in terms of absorbing refugees. It's there, like I said, that the problem is most acute, and I salute this initiative, and I hope that other cities will follow that example in sharing lessons and even resources. So let me conclude by saying that I think we are moving away fairly rapidly from a certain number of traditional responses to refugee flows, the exclusively humanitarian focus. Still very important, but very short term, not adequate to the new realities of protracted and massive crisis. We're moving away from this government UN exclusive response to a whole of society coalition approach. So broader responses. And I do believe that if we can bring cities more firmly into this framework, we will have really made progress in achieving what the 1951 Refugee Convention's terms international responsibility for refugees. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gondi, for those words. And I think this proposal of an ExCom of cities is one that we will certainly continue to lobby for, I think, as the Vice President of SUSMASA was saying. And it's interesting to hear some clever ideas coming from the mayor of Madrid, similar ideas from the mayor of Zurich, I understand, with Beirut. And without further ado, we will now hear from those who are responsible for the Migration Compact. We've heard from Mr. Grandi about the work being done for this compact or accord between states for refugees. And now we will hear from the two individuals, really, who are going to be shepherding the negotiations of states. First, the permanent representative, Ambassador Jürg Lauber of Switzerland to the United Nations, who is also the chair of the Peacebuilding Commission. He will speak first, and then followed by Ambassador Juan José Gómez Camacho, who is the permanent representative of Mexico to the United Nations. Please, Ambassador Lauber.
Thank you very much. It's a bit of a conundrum because we always speak with one voice. So I'm sorry, Juan Jose. Many thanks to IPI, everybody who's involved for this event, for doing it. I think it's a great event of bringing these people together and for giving us the opportunity to just say a few words. You know, as you heard, I'm from Switzerland. Switzerland has a total population of about 8.5 million. That's about roughly what New York City has. So I'm not quite sure if I have any credentials to talk to you as a city boy. But I lived in a few big cities, not least New York. And so I know, of course, as everybody else, that in so many developments, cities are absolutely at the forefront, technological, socioeconomic, environmental, et cetera, et cetera. And also for migration, very much as the High Commissioner just pointed out, for refugees in these whole movements, cities play a key role. They are what attracts large movements of people, but they're also what they have to profit a lot from the talent and the diversity these people bring to the cities. And probably, I haven't studied this very detailed, but if you look at how successful cities do, it's probably those who are the most successful who found the best way to integrate migrants and really bring them together in a city. And I believe that's what the member states decided they want to do on a global level when they concluded the New York Declaration last year, to bring what happens in successful cities to a global level. That's what the member states want to do, and that's the mandate they gave themselves. So I think what we need to do in this process now is to bring the experience of the cities into the process. The process is in three phases. We are ending phase number one, which is basically about bringing experience, data together, not about political discussions, but making everybody more familiar with the phenomenon of migration. And on behalf of my co-facilitator and I would also extend an invitation, as the High Commissioner did. It's absolutely important that cities participate in these talks and in these exchanges. We understood our mandate from the beginning, and we very much try to live up to it, to make this process very transparent and very inclusive. It's an intergovernmental process, but it's very clear, and the member states are very clear about that as well, that it's open. We need to open it and have many stakeholders in the discussion. So I would appeal to the representatives of the cities to make sure that they have a say in this process. I'm sure our Mexican hosts will reserve a table or two or some seats at the table for the Mexican conference. And I would also, and I would appeal to the member states, to our delegations here in New York and to the capitals, to make sure that they have city representatives, mayors and other representatives in their delegations when we start the serious negotiations about the compact next year, and when we come together next year around this time, possibly in a big city, for the conclusion of that global compact on safe, orderly and regular migration. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And as Jürg said, we speak with one voice, so I may sound repetitive. We are, as he said, in the first phase of these negotiations or the process for these negotiations. And one of the biggest challenges and commitments that we have in this process is to have, as we say, a 360-degree approach to migration, meaning that for this to be successful, we need to understand every angle, every phase, every side, every reason why migration happens. And also we are trying to, thank you, we are also trying to do it, or this also to say that migration in this approach is a single holistic phenomenon. It's not only the approach from so-called countries of destination or so-called countries of origin or who benefits from what. It's understanding that migration has a start, has an ending, and all of it is one single thing. And this is important to understand. Second, we divided to get this 360 degrees approach all this process in 6 thematic sessions, and we have had so far 5. The most recurrent mention, insistence, comment coming from both delegations and civil society and other stakeholders is what matters at the end of the day. What we should keep in mind and address is the local level. And why the local level? Well, because the local level is actually where migrants live, where migrants come, what attracts migrants. One of the interesting things that we have discovered throughout this process is that we are now starting to get, because we are starting to get, and we are insisting in getting evidence, figures, statistics, is the enormous contribution that migrants make to the global economy, to countries' economies, and particularly to cities' economies. We now know that more or less migrants represent 3.3% of the global population, but they contribute with almost 9% of the global GDP, creating or producing almost $7 trillion every year. That's far bigger than the GDP of the vast majority of countries in the world. So this is the sort of approach we are having, and again, the cities play a fundamental role. And fourth, this, yes, is a negotiation that is governments-led. Yes, is a negotiation that will be decided by governments. There's no question. However, we all have decided, governments, that this has to be the most inclusive, the most transparent, the most open process possible, as far as we can. This means that, and because we are approaching migration in 360 degrees, that every stakeholder, every entity, every group that has anything to say, that has any participation in the phenomenon has to participate. And again, cities are fundamental. So I joined Ambassador Lauber in really encouraging you to get involved. Mayors are the ones that can explain the real or the reality on the ground of migrants. And second, please help us in getting evidence, in getting numbers, in getting figures. One fundamental aspect of this negotiation is, and this is why it's organized the way it is, that before we start to actually negotiate anything, we need to leave aside or leave behind perceptions, general impressions based on perceptions, and to negotiate based on evidence. Then we will disagree or agree. It's going to be tough, very tough anyway. But this is what will make it successful. If we negotiate based only on perceptions, we will fail. Well, to do this transition from perceptions to evidence, we need very much your help to achieve it. Thank you so much, and always very happy to work with you.
Mr. Ambassador Gomez Camacho, for those words. We heard at the beginning of this mayor's panel from Mayor of Bristol that this was a small group, a relatively small group, but it potentially had very big implications. And it already sounds from this short discussion that we've had many very concrete proposals on how to support, as Mayor Reid was saying, bold leadership amongst the group. We heard about the proposal to have a committee at UNHCR that would be for cities, of mayors being systematically included in national delegations where policy decisions are being made in these areas, support for small and medium-sized cities, perhaps from other cities, pooling together to help them both on the practical side and on the governance side, and a network of platinum practices and people, the people who drive those initiatives, to put those people in contact. These are just some of the suggestions that I've heard, and I'm sure we'll hear from our colleagues in the closing remarks that are going to follow right now. But first, let me invite you all for a round of applause for this conversation and for the panel of mayors. I'm going to pass the floor back to Michael Doyle. Before I do so, one housekeeping remark. All city representatives, mayors, vice mayors, and city officials, if you can please exit the side door where we have Beatrice with her hand raised as soon as we're done, because we will quickly be escorting you to the Concordia, to the next venue. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Colleen. This is one of those classic situations where everything has been said, but not everyone has said it. And I'm going to try, with my good colleague, Gregory Manatas, to offer a few closing remarks. Gregory's going to join me in a moment in these closing remarks. I want to say how happy I am to have a partnership with Gregory. He is the leader of the International Migration Initiative at the Open Societies Foundation. Anyone who has been following the issues of migration around the world today knows what a crucial leadership role OSF has played in all of these negotiations. For the work that we do and for the work beyond this room, they have been pioneers in all of that. Gregory also, as a partner, has been a senior advisor to Peter Sutherland for, I think, almost 10 years right now. And Peter has told me repeatedly that he could not have taken the great role that he did over all these years in keeping the question of migration front and center in the global community without Gregory's help in all of that process. The Sutherland Report, which is in many respects a culmination of the great ideas that Peter and his team generated, owes a great deal to Gregory and his team that put it together in the writing. These are all Peter's ideas, but without Gregory and the team, it would not have come forward. And this is an inspiring statement on what can happen in migration. So in a moment, Gregory's going to offer some closing remarks. My closing remarks are very simple. That is, what are the takeaways from this excellent conversation this morning? We all thank the four mayors here that spoke, those of you in the audience who provided ideas, Madame Arbour, President Robinson, the two facilitators who have so much work ahead of them in the next year and on whom we are all counting, and Mr. Grandi, who leads the refugee protection issue around the world. I think we heard that the mayors need a global engagement, and that the globe needs a mayoral engagement. That is the bottom line message that we heard. One of the most encouraging things Colleen just mentioned is the invitations that came from the global level to all the mayors. That is, from UNHCR to invite the mayors to Geneva, from the two compact facilitators welcoming the input from the mayors. And we know, and we've heard from the mayor of Kampala, and we know from other mayors, how important that the international community meet the kind of responsibilities that are embedded in the 1951 Convention. There may only be 3 words about international cooperation in the preamble to the 51 Convention, but those words are vitally important. We can no longer exist in a world where asylum is being provided, 85% of asylum is being provided by developing countries. We need genuine shared responsibility, and the mayors from the developing world have made that very clear. So that's what the mayors need from the global level. What the mayors can do for the global level is each and in every way as important. We've already heard that a network is being formed, right? It's called the Global Parliament of Mayors. That kind of a network is essential, that the conversations that are taking place here in New York today, tomorrow, continue to help inform policymaking amongst states and with international and multilateral organizations. That network is essential. So what should that network be doing? We've already heard. It should be doing a few things. It should be sharing best practices. That is, a great deal of learning is taking place around the world. We heard from Mayor Reid that the one phone, I might not be able to phone him up, but the phone call he will take is from a fellow mayor. And the mayors will listen to each other, and therefore framing a network where they can learn lessons from each other is a very important takeaway, I think, from these meetings. And one hopes that it becomes part of the agenda for the Global Parliament. It's not just enough that lessons be shared. They need to be gold standard or platinum standard. That is, there needs to be some voice that says, this is really working here. Here are the ones to pay attention to, and here's why. And we heard this from the mayor of Altena. He would like that kind of guidance, a place that one can go to for the kind of information that's useful in tackling all the problems at the local level. So this learning platform is absolutely vital. The other thing that that learning platform, I think, needs to affect is an ability to enhance both the voices of mayors so that they become the word, a sort of a new sovereignty or a participation in sovereignty is going to make our governmental representatives here a bit neuralgic, it has to be said. So let's translate that into a new voice that gets heard in an effective way to deal with the genuine problems that mayors themselves face. I think that's absolutely essential, and we heard that message. And the last point that I would emphasize as a takeaway is the importance of solidarity. That is, that many cities in the world do not have the resources of an Atlanta or even an Altena and not a Bristol. And those cities are the ones that are in the deepness of their hearts experiencing the kind of need for responsibility sharing that we've heard from the mayor of Kampala. I've just got a message. The Global Parliament of Mayors is meeting this coming Sunday to Tuesday in Shostok. And so there are outcomes that are already taking place. So thank you very much. I want to now turn it over to my colleague and good friend, Gregory Magnatis, for some further closing remarks.
Thank you. That was, Michael's praise was far too fulsome, but thank you. And it reminds me that the really first thing I'd like to do is just lead off with my thanks to the people who made this possible. Whatever I do is really a function of what their incredible talents are, I think. First of all, IPI, thank you for hosting and co-organizing this event for us. Michael, thank you for being such a great partner over many years with Peter Sutherland. Your team at the Columbia Global Policy Initiative, Maggie Powers and Emma Borges, have been indispensable in organizing this morning and also this afternoon, where we'll continue at Concordia. The team at the Open Society Foundations, led by Maria Teresa Rojas, my colleague, also Emma Lobelson, Hadley Cooper, Lucretia Keenan, and many others who make this possible. This has been a collective effort, and that collective effort would have been just scattered and gone to pot, frankly, if it hadn't been for Colleen Tuas. Colleen has been leading this effort, not just today, but from the very beginning. She has been that voice of reason and passion about the importance of cities, and it is such a pleasure to be here doing this with you under your guidance. You knew what was coming, and that was really, really critical. And it strikes me that there could be no better group of people to have at my back right now than all of you, the mayors. What you said today brought tears to my eyes, I'm sure to other people's eyes, and it reminded me of what mayors have more than perhaps anyone else, which is you can see into the future. You can see into the future because you are living people's lives with them, alongside of them. You are not distant. You're not in some faraway capital. You are there alongside of them. When you mentioned, Mayor Holstein, climate change and migration coming together, right? That's what you're seeing it. You're living it. You're experiencing. You're hearing the stories of people who are fleeing because of climate. So first, I just wanted to say thank you to all of you for making this possible. Two other really quick points. We heard a lot of great ideas. We've heard a lot of really important experiences. You've just heard them recently. I'm not going to recap them. But I think that they reinforce this notion of cities as a layer of governance that needs to have respect at the UN level, at the national level. And I think that we're making headway there, and that hope that we can continue to do that. You heard also some good ideas. I'm just going to call out two of them, which I thought were particularly interesting. One was Ted Terry talking about the importance of Atlanta, that kind of force field of a large city that has a lot of experience, and what it can do as a hub, radiating out its experience and drawing in those smaller towns and cities around it. So if we can think about how cities of migration can become hubs of learning for smaller towns and cities around, I think that would be really quite extraordinary. We also heard reference in a couple different instances to the idea of a global fund to support refugees. Well, that global fund should go directly to cities. There should be a kind of option for cities to take in refugees, that if that local fund, that global fund is willing to support them, then the national governments should allow that to happen. I thought that was an interesting idea, and I'm really delighted that Filippo Grandi came and was, we were together in the morning, but that you brought up the notion of incorporating cities more firmly into the governance of UNICEF, of UNHCR, and I think that's a critically important idea, and I hope that we'll also see that same kind of cooperation with the co-facilitators of the Global Compact on migration. And I'll just close by saying, really what struck me the most in listening to the mayors was the language that they used. It's language that's different than what you usually hear in multilateral settings, quite honestly. It is full of candor, as Mayor Reid said. It is full of humanity. It is authentic. As Mayor Reese said, mayors have to deal not in numbers but in lives. And that, I think, even absent the specific experiences, the specific best practices, having your voices there with their credibility, with their authenticity, is critical. So you mentioned, Mayor Reid, that we're being out-passioned. I don't think we were out-passioned today. And I don't think we're going to be out-passioned in the future. You're too busy to hate. You're too busy to do a lot of this work of figuring out where to plug into the international system. That's why we're there. And we, as the Open Society Foundations, are committed to making you part of the conversation at the national and the international level. And so we hope that you will be with us on this journey for a very long time to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gregory. That was very inspirational and a wonderful note on which to conclude this morning part of the Global Mayor Summit. Thank you all for those who have come, the ambassadors of Mexico and Switzerland, the High Commissioner, the President of IPI, thank you very much. Please, all city officials, mayors, vice mayors, and city officials out the door where we have Beatrice waiting for you. Thank you very much. See many of you this afternoon.